Alright, so one of the things that I found about dumb old Mormons, and any of them, is that they attempt to get, like, basically what would be like a skull and crossbones. It's, it's like a Bilderberg group, basically. In that, essentially, you have to do a skull, basically. I mean, those people long ago, whoever that skull is, represented them finishing out all of Satanism, basically. And then they're able to have a worldwide satanic society group separate from other ones. See, essentially, these satanic society groups are submissive to the ones that have finished full, authentic Satanism at some point in their existence. And so, Mormons. One of the things about Mormons is they attempt to do this, but they have a variant religion that essentially is represented by they don't do the elitist art, they don't do the elitist Satanism or religion, they don't do the elitist Platonian method, and they don't do the elitist Republic method. And so, basically, what they attempt to do in a satanic way limits them on finishing essentially what most people may not realize, but that's kind of what a satanic cult group basically attempts to do this. They may not realize it. Most of them make mistakes, that's all the time. But eventually, centuries go by and they figure out how to do boilerplate Satanism. I mean, that's where to be the submissive satanic cult essentially becomes slaves to those kind of people. And then eventually they start to adhere to what the standard boilerplate is. And that then one of the problems with Mormon is that they pedo touch. Least is most. And see, it means it most nullifies their ability as a satanic society to ever achieve this. See, this right here essentially is a non-pedophile satanic society. And so doing the pedo touch pretty much deletes the middle block. And it means that essentially it just takes away the ability to having an ending. See, essentially, the theoretics is that when they engulf or when they embark on building a satanic society, more than likely Joseph Smith would have done this at the very first prairie to establish his satanic Masonic society, and that would have always made people who follow that never being able to achieve their own separate, basically. it makes it a witches' society, and that most people make this mistake when like the Skull and Bones. They are a witches' society. Their Skull and Bones society probably was established on the very first person doing a prairie and touching the wizard boy at it. That's pretty typical of what people do at a prairie. It's like the first mistake is the mistake that defines your whole society. And so this is where, in the dark webs that operate in these ways, essentially what they're attempting to strive for is this. And that all of those people that start a satanic S&M club, they're essentially attempting to establish their own separate skull and bones in the world, basically. And that everybody does that at a prairie tree in it. I mean, everybody does. And so that is where the computer program that governs the rule sets for that stuff. Everybody uploads that first. And what that means for, this is what I talk about the Nazi pedagogue. This is what that S&M is actually, okay? And nowadays, you get a group of 6 hackers together, and they essentially do a prairie, and then they basically touch some kid's penis or groin or something. And then that gets uploaded into that app, and then essentially all the blackmailing pushes everybody to be doing this. And that essentially the very first thing that they do is what prevents them from ever finishing the path. And so, the reason, like the mafia essentially has, like the Cosa Nostra is this, and that they have people that make that mistake trying to start their own separate. See, the mafia's S&M is essentially, a lot of people may not know this, it's essentially people that are trying to start their own separate Cosa Nostra. And it became prevalent for people to be doing those S&Ms in New York because essentially they wanted to start their own separate Cosa Nostra, separate from Sicily, basically. And that the Sicilians, way back when, at the beginning of La Cosa Nostra, they bitch moved on the Vatican, and that with that, had them not doing this at their establishment of a prairie, and that from that, they may have had errors, but over time, they would have figured out how to build, essentially, they're all kind of considered a satanic society, but theoretically, but they would have figured out how to build this, and that is what, basically, they're one of the only people that they benefited off of the Catholic thought process of bitch moving, and that when they would have established the beginnings of La Cosa Nostra, they would have bitch moved off of the Pope, who used to be in Catholic clubs in centuries ago, and that they would touch a child around the prairie tree, and then since they were gangsters, they would bitch move. And so then, in ways, in New York City, they kind of have like a similar idea, where there, the American Catholicism, the type of priest or bishop that they would be bitch moving from off of doesn't touch. And so then the New York families would have bitch moved, and then that is kind of why they have an S&M. This is the witches. That's why they always had a sex club. I mean, this is the sex club. This is an S&M, basically. And those apps that everybody uses on darkweb are based on this stuff. And so if you're trying, I mean, if you figure out how to do it, it'll turn on an AI. It will. But see, if your fucking stupid society was founded on a Joseph Smith pedally touch, and then you move down to Brigham Young doing great cuckolder, see, that is where their society, I mean, if they're gonna use those apps, it'll fit into their weird temple theoretic shit. It will. Because that's like what everybody did in the past. They attempt to build a sex club. So, this is basically what the whole idea is, that the things that the Mormons do in their temple when they structure like leaderships and stuff like that, it's built around this stuff. And so when they would have stumbled across these societal S&M apps, that they don't necessarily have to be run as an S&M if you do it right. But it'll like, it attempts to find the like right people for like the right leadership positions or something, and then it usually fits into what the old Mormon theology people would view as the right persons in the right spot or something. And that's because that stuff's built off of an old Masonic sex club idea, and the reality is that being tagged Mormon in those apps has this. And then, since you guys established yourselves as cucks for doing cuckolding with Brigham Young, essentially, so you're not allowed to have more than 4 wives. That's a rule. And he had 72, right? And so that is like Satanism when it comes to harems. That's a horribly blatant satanic harem in that app. And so then, since you guys do like Platonian Psycho in ways, then that's not the correct way to do that stuff. And since you guys run everything in like a capitalism is essentially like, see, greed and money. I mean, you guys kind of do like a communism, and so that is where you all essentially like, this is what your guys' society is based on. And then if you're going to do communism, then you're still not doing that. So that kind of fills that out. And then if you guys aren't doing, I mean, they do bitch braining and psychology and shit to their community. And then you guys run corrupt law kind of ideas and shit. And that is where all of you that use those apps, if you don't do capitalism, if you're not doing like regular ethical psychology and surgery and ethical pharmaceutical kind of stuff, and if you're not doing regular, fair, constitutional, not special caveats for Mormon law, yeah, then you people that use those apps, essentially, the fucking tapes and shit turn on in that stuff, and that is where, you know, see, this type of stuff wasn't actually meant for people to be copying and pasting all over the place. This is like, you know, the Nazis, they essentially do this. Also, this is why they're similar-ish. But that they just devoid. See, they don't really teach anybody. They let everybody learn themselves. They don't do any religion. Their art is considered like AutoCAD. And that then when it comes to government, they essentially, they don't necessarily have what would be considered a government. They put on an illusion of government, basically, but it's not necessarily a government. Not in a republic way. And so that's where they basically technically don't do these, basically. And that then they do these in actual ways, in like what would be expected in this kind of realm. And so that is kind of like where I see these Mormons sometimes are like trying to bitch move off of these Nazis that have a similar kind of app or something. And whatever they're doing is like pretty much what you're supposed to do. And that the reality is that even though it's like filled in, you're still supposed to do republic and democracy. I guess this one is republic, but that's where none of you actually get to be a part of it, but you have to adhere to the power of those people. And then you people are essentially supposed to be taught by people that use the ethical Platonian method. And that then you're all supposed to essentially like vacate being a Mormon. You're all supposed to basically go to a regular Christian church. And then you're all supposed to like essentially learn how to think a little more abstractly to be able to have creative output in your brain, but essentially you have it would be like Monet and Manet or something you'd have to learn from a Picasso or a Monet in these theoretical ways. You would have to be under their tutelage in the older art apprentice way. So, if you're going to use those dark webs that are built in these ways, just remember that whatever group whatever prairie you're doing it under, basically, you can't. It is what dictates, okay? So it's like, if you get the app or whatever, if they're Nazis, it labels Nazi. And then they pretty much have to adhere to this. And then if you're a Mormon Templar or something, you get one of these, and it'll label all of you Mormon, and you guys kind of have to adhere to this. And it has to do with the beginning and establishment of your attempts to be a prairie society. See, I just did a prairie without doing any satanic sex stuff. I know how to do that. See, I can artfully envision my own stuff. I mean, here's an example where I didn't train under anybody. Here's an example. Here's an example of me doing my own artful stuff. I already know most things about theology and shit like that. I already know how to do concise Platonian like teaching and shit. And I already do capitalism. I already do Democrat Republic. I do logical psychology. I do science in a medicine and pharmaceutical way. I adhere to essentially what is logical law and shit. And then I do mathematics in the calculus way, placed down by a prairie boy called Newton. I do a society of people that are supposed to be elite, smart people. So, that's the whole idea, is that, you know, when essentially, I just do that as a way of living my life. And so, that's where you people, like, you know, you can't get, this is like, I know that the Nazis built it, okay? Because they made it to where you couldn't access it unless you did that. And that's indicative of everything about Nazis. They like to do stuff like that. Because they fucked up. And then they act like whiny little pedophiles. And then they go around sabotaging everyone else. Just like you. Okay? I mean, theoretically, that's basically what it is. That's why they made it. They wanted everybody that, essentially, like the Skull and Bones people. They placed this out there for them. And then they all went and did this and re-prairied or something, so that they could use it. And that is essentially where it prevents. See, the whole idea is that they theoretically could have had that one of these, basically, but they like decided to read prairie or something like that, and then they all did that shit. And so that comes from Nazis psychopping people into fucking up their app shit. But see, they sadistly made it. And here's the rules that they made it around. And so, if it seems like I'm talking about stuff in the past, it's like these are the rule sets that they built that fucking dark web shit that everybody uses for cover-ups and shit. they built it around this theoretic. So, this is like where I know this because all I did was go, this, this block, art. And then I know what art means. It means pathos and expressiveness in an artistic way with creativity. That's what it means. And so that's where I already know how to do all of this. The religion, I knew it was a Nazi thing, okay? I knew that all those dark webs were built, these cover-up ones. And that then I knew what semantics. Bible says this. Do this. And so this is how I think like this anyways. And so then when it came to philosophy, logic and ethics and pathos, that is what I live my life under those three terms, and I have since I was a little boy. At least I strive to. And that is where in government, the only difference is like, I knew that it was republic, okay? I knew that it was emperor-based, okay? I know that. I know what that means. I know what that... See, I knew that the Nazis made these cover-up systems. And I knew what the Roman Empire is. And I know what that government block and what they were... If you ever look at all their sigils and shit like that, they were attempting to reestablish essentially a German version of the Roman Emperor, basically. And so that is like literally where I knew that it was built around the satanic party system. And so I know all of that stuff. And so then it's essentially like this is basically what people would view as like it's the bizarre market, and then it's Jewish bank, basically, or I guess Vatican Bank or Swiss bank, and then it's elitist noblemen that pull tariffs and taxes off of the poor people. And see, I know all this stuff. And so that is where this stuff was very easy for me because I already understand this stuff. And that you people just need to realize that half of your guys' problem is that none of you are accepting what you all put yourselves into. And that when you guys start to accept fucking reality about that shit, then maybe you'll start to live some semblance of a better fucking life.